thanks everyone for logging on to this phenomenal panel here. It's I guess lunchtime in a good part of the country here, and we're going to do our best to make sure that you don't fall into the lunch lull here, and keep everyone up and awake. This panel here is about bold predictions for staffing and recruiting, and I guess almost talent acquisition overall for 24 and 2025. And we're going to have a good conversation here with this fantastic panel and my colleagues who have joined here. I like to say sometimes, like, moderating a panel can be hard and like real work, or it can be super fun and easy. And the moderator, in this case myself, can just lean back and listen. And I think that's what's going to happen here today. The secret is to coerce some of the people that into joining the panel, who are simply super knowledgeable about the topic here. And I will let Rika, Jenny, and Doug introduce themselves in a second, but clearly we have some serious firepower on this panel here with regards to people who've been around in this industry for a long time and lead very significant companies in the space, have access to phenomenal research and data from millions of people. So super excited. I should say, my name is Daniel Masada. I'm the founder and CEO of Volante. We're focused on change management, but I did spend 20 years of my life in the staffing business myself, in the staffing industry with the Adecco Group in a number of different places. And I'm excited to be the host of this session here today. So what we will do is a quick round of intros. I'll say Rika, Doug, Jenny, and then I do have a little icebreaker question for you. And then we'll jump right into bold predictions for 24 and 25. Does that work for everybody?
Sure.
Yes.
Great. Good. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for hosting this, and thanks everyone for attending this session. My name is Rika Coppens. I'm the CEO of House of HR. We're a European-based HR company. We have a revenue of 3.4 billion, mostly located in Belgium, Germany, France, and Holland, but also with some branches in Poland, Romania, Spain, and Portugal. So have grown really fast over the last couple of years. And I think one of the things we are known for at House of HR is that we say that HR stands for many things. It stands for huge respect. It stands for human resourcefulness. But most of all, it stands for happy rebel. And that's who we like to be as House of HR. We have a saying that when everyone goes left, we want to go right. And I think this is exactly what has brought us where we are today, where we really focus on talent scarcity and scarce talents. And that has also made us who we are, and has also made us one of the most profitable companies, I think, in the sector. My background is as a CPA first and a CFO. But I've always been told that I was a very strange CFO because I was too curious to stay in that area. So I now am really happy that I can be the CEO of House of HR, a company I truly love and where I can do the most beautiful job in the world, and that's giving a job to people. So that's me.
Great. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me, Daniel, and great to be with my esteemed panelists. My name is Doug Levy. I enter my 24th year at Beeline, my 14th as CEO. Probably most of you know us, maybe some of you hate us, but at any rate, we're, of course, VMS, vendor management software. We pivoted more to what we call the extended workforce platform. And maybe we'll get into it today, maybe we won't. I'll be the first to admit that your community has been left by the side over the last couple of decades. And I think what's kind of interesting about the space now is it's pivoting. Obviously, COVID put an emphasis on talent, and there's always been somewhat of an emphasis on managed service providers, but less so on staffing. And I think that's really changed over the last 3 years. So hopefully at some point we'll have an opportunity to go a little bit deeper in terms of our approach is now we're looking at all the personas where, full disclosure, for 2 decades, I've just been trying to win the client, right? And we've had some sort of lip service towards the other stools, legs on the stool. And what we realized is it's really important for us to focus in on the talent and on the supply side. So there's some pretty neat things coming out this year, which will actually be catered to your winnability using data, et cetera. just, obviously there's two big guys or gals in the market. You've heard of the other one. I won't give them the dignity of naming them. But we're streaming about $60 billion to the system on any given year. And in aggregate, we've got a little bit over $1 trillion. So we're actually putting that to good use in terms of our analytics and insights as well. And I'm going to pass it over to Jenny, but I'm just pleased to be here, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate that. So my name is Jenny Dede. Currently, I lead the North American sales team that is focused on search and staffing at LinkedIn. Been there 8 years. I've just been in sales for the past 2 years, actually led their global customer success team prior to that. But before coming to LinkedIn, spent just about 20 years in staffing, primarily in RPO, worked at Adecco, Randstad, and Cielo before I came to LinkedIn. So staffing is very near and dear to my heart. So happy to be supporting and working in the segment, in the industry. So do you want me to start with the bold and then we'll go backwards? The boldest thing?
Let's do that. Yeah, the question is, as you know already, but for the audience here as well, what's the boldest thing that you've done? That you can
share? Before we go, Rika, do you see what she just did? So she's going to go, and then we're going to go backwards.
Yeah. Backwards. Yeah.
Well played.
But wait until you hear our boldest stories, right?
I'm not very bold. Like I didn't have a great story. So I'm like, I'll go first because then I can set the bar. So the boldest thing I think I've ever done is leave Rochester, New York. So I grew up in Rochester, had no expectations of ever leaving, went to college there. All my family and friends that are there. And when I was 27, I got moved to be on site with a customer and left my family. My parents are still really upset about it, 16 years later. But yeah, I think that's the boldest thing I've done.
Nice. And no offense to everybody else in Rochester, right?
No offense. I love Rochester.
Right.
Chicago's a little better. I mean, just a little bit.
Did you go to U of R?
I went to St. John Fisher.
Okay.
I was going to be a teacher.
Awesome. Well, you're still a teacher, just in different forms. It's just funny. I grew up in Syracuse, and so anybody who doesn't know, my dog's from Rochester, or was back in the day, so we're neighbors.
Nice.
I kind of looked at this question twofold. One was personally, and one was professionally. Personally, I don't know that I've done that many bold things, but on Father's Day last year, my wife said, "Oh, I got you a great gift. We're going to jump out of an airplane," and that's something I've always wanted to do. I said, "That's something you've always wanted to do, not really something I want to do." So we did, and it was fine until we jumped out. It was sort of peaceful and kind of cool. Maybe many of you have done it. And then all of a sudden I heard, shit, the lines are tied. And so obviously I'm here. So it worked out, but it wasn't the most pleasant trip down. So that felt relatively bold. And then when I think career-wise, really bringing IQ Navigator and Beeline together had market impact, but also cultural impact. And culture is really important to me. And so that on paper made a lot of sense, but I had a lot of fear and trepidation in terms of what that might do to the culture of the organization. I would say that was probably the most bold thing I did in my professional world. Now, let's go forward to Rika, and you can share what you've done.
Yeah, well, I'm going to make a combination of professional and personal. So last year, or every 2 years at House of HR, we organize a Happy Rebel Festivals for all our internal employees. So it's kind of a real rock festival. And in order to announce it at House of HR, we say, get out of your comfort zone. That's where the real magic happens. So in order to embody that, I decided indeed to jump out of a plane and land on the exact location where the festival was going to be to announce it. And then 2 weeks ago, I had to announce the next festival. So I had to invent something else. So I climbed an old mining tower at -8 when it was also -8 degrees, to announce that was going to be where the party is going to be. So that's what I do professionally, in a way, to announce to the internal Happy Rebels where we are going to have our next party, because that's important.
You just raised the bar there, Rika, in terms of what you have to do to get budgeted.
It was not in my job description, I can assure you. So.
Great. Well, great stories. Thanks all for sharing. Doug, we're all thankful and happy that you're here after hearing what happened. I don't know. Do you think the skydiving instructor just wanted to mess with you, or was it real?
No, and this was kind of funny because you have to do a lot of jumps before you take a guy in tandem. And I said, gosh, that was a little bit hairy, but you were very cool, calm, and collected. And he goes, yeah, honestly, I haven't jumped in 6 months, and I just got off a wicked divorce.
Oh my God.
I think he sort of didn't care what happened, and that's why he was so cool and calm and collected about the whole thing.
Wow, great story. Well, great stories, all of you. Thanks again for sharing. That was the icebreaker part of the conversation here. We didn't really need an icebreaker anyway, but here we are. Let's jump into the actual topic for our discussion here, right? And this panel today. And as I said at the beginning, the headline here is bold predictions for 24 and 25 for recruiting, staffing, talent acquisition overall. I know that you all have, good perspectives there and obviously great insights into the market. So I know that we're all curious to hear what those predictions are from your perspective. When I first thought about this headline, bold predictions, I said to myself, it feels like the last 10 years in this industry, like we like every year we expect like the big thing to happen and the big change to come, and then a lot of it actually doesn't change very quickly. So super excited here to hear from all of you, being the experts and leaders that you are, what you think is actually going to change in this industry in 24 and 25. And this time, sorry, Jenny, but this time I'm going to set the order of responses here.
Fine.
So this time, let's go with Rika first. Let's hear from you. Super interesting also to have, of course, your view from the European continent. Doug, would love to go for you to go second. And, you have a great perspective, from the software angle, of course, and at the same time, this industry like few other people out there. And then Jenny, LinkedIn is not only this massive organization, that helps, I think, 1 billion people in the world now with their professional networking. But also I know that you all have a treasure trove of data and insights, from your members and from all the companies you serve. So maybe we go there last. And then we're opening up, obviously, to discussion, conversation here, but also for the audience, anything here that you want to ask this team, any questions that you have or your own bold predictions, just drop them in the Q&A. I think that would be best. Like in this panel here on the right, I see a tab that says Q&A. So maybe let's log questions and comments in there instead of the chat, because otherwise it gets buried in there very quickly. So with that in mind, Rika, over to you.
I think indeed giving a bit of a European perspective, right? Because we're based in Europe. So I think when staffing used to be very cyclical, it was kind of easy because they said, okay, you have an up cycle and a down cycle, and this is how it will go. I think the last couple of years, and that's why we haven't seen the big things happen, is that the big theme in staffing and talent management and recruiting is talent scarcity. And so that has really changed the game. And in Europe particularly, and especially in Belgium, Holland, Germany, we're going a little bit the Japanese way when it comes to demographics. So demographics are really kind of scary. In 2030, there will be, for every 100 people leaving the labor market, only 80 people entering the labor market. So, and on top of that, we know that at the same time, the skills are changing, what people need to know on the market. So there is a very, very big change in this market dynamic that actually changes the fact that we are not just cyclical, but we also need to take into account all these other factors that impact the labor market, such as scarcity, such as talent development, and the mismatch, the sheer mismatch that there is in the labor market. So the bold prediction, but of course we cannot deny that there is some cycle going on. There is some recessionary movement going on in the latest couple of months. If I take the figures for Belgium and Holland, in the temp labor segment, blue collar, it has been going backwards in the last 18 months already, which is quite long. But to actually compensate that, there has been a very big inflationary move on the euro and on the salaries, which has compensated somewhat the volume decline. But it's already 18 months that we have seen volumes declining because of talent scarcity on the one hand, but also because of this recessionary movement that we have seen. So predictions for 24 for me are tough first quarter, maybe even a tough second quarter. And then from then onwards, I do predict that demand will come back, but it will also come back fiercely. And I think the talent scarcity and the difficulty to find people will even hit us harder than it was just after COVID. The advice I give to companies is don't start too late thinking of what are the people that I need to accomplish growth, what are the talents that I need, and really anticipate, because if you come onto the labor market too late, you will actually see it in your growth figures yourself. So that would be my bold predictions for 24 and 25, that the scarcity will hit us harder than ever before as from 25.
Super interesting, Rika. One question, the demographics element that you're talking about, do you feel like, so typically demographics is like a longer term thing, right, that we don't worry about, but do you feel like it's starting to impact the industry now already?
It's already there, so we already see it in Belgium, particularly in certain sectors, healthcare being one of them, where a lot of nurses that come to the age of 55, 60, they are entitled to go on earlier retirement. So they're choosing to work less. And I always say the fact also that post-COVID in Europe, also people are choosing to work maybe less or take a second job in a completely different industry. If everyone decides to work one day less, it's a 20% reduction in the talent availability. So also that is impacting obviously the scarcity that you see, and especially in healthcare segments, in construction segment, we really see that that is impacting the market. And what we try to tell as House of HR to politicians and to policymakers is that part of the solution for European countries will be in flexibility and actually enabling flexibility even more in the labor market, because we have quite stringent regimes in Europe when it comes to labor and working hours. So make flexibility even more a topic so that people can choose when they work. Just to give us an example, a nurse in Belgium on average works about 24 hours a week. And all of them indicate that if they would be able to work more flexibly, they would be willing to work more hours. So that is already a solution to labor scarcity, is to actually augment the possibilities there are to work more flexibly. And the second solution, of course, will be labor migration. But that, of course, is, as it is in the US, it's a very sensitive topic, especially also politically. It's not a popular topic. It's not a topic that wins elections, but it is definitely a topic that needs to be addressed also in order to support the welfare that we currently have in the European countries.
Great insights. Yeah. For a split second, I was thinking about making the headline for this panel here, bold predictions for the US election, but then I moved that idea. No, I didn't want to do that. Thanks.
It's going to be huge.
Yeah.
That was really funny.
Before I hand over to you, Doug, I just see in the chat here, Crystal saying interesting insights from Rika and many applicable to the US labor market, right? One of the things that I've always believed in is that, if you're in the US, you better keep an eye out on what's happening in Europe and in other markets, and vice versa, right? If you're in Europe, don't think, what happens in the US doesn't apply to me. Like sooner or later, this stuff travels, right? It sometimes takes years. Like some time ago, I said, for something to really settle on the other side of the continent, it takes like 5 to 7 years. So it's not like it's happening tomorrow, but some of the longer term trends and changes ultimately always end up in your own market. So that's why having Rika's perspective here, I think is super relevant and interesting too. So great. Well, I'm sure we'll come back with questions and thoughts to you, Rika. But first, let's hear from Doug.
Yeah, thanks. You said something I was actually going to preface my comments with as well. And it takes me back to, I was on another panel a year or two ago, and somebody asked the question, what's new in technology? What's innovative? What's groundbreaking? And, Rika, you may appreciate this answer because it sounds like something you might say, given your rebel nature. But I said, it doesn't matter because you aren't going to adopt it, right? And so we get all sort of crazy with the analysts and all these new terms and buzzwords and total talent management and all this stuff. And yet it goes back to what you just said, Daniel. At the end of the day, the industry at large is relatively lethargic and reticent to change. And I don't mean staffing. I mean our buyers. And let's be fair. She's managing 100 categories, right? So I'm not disparaging them, but the reality is, it's kind of like the airplane was available long before people knew it was, long before it became commercial. It was available for all sorts of other commercial endeavors, like, you know, transporting goods and stuff, but it didn't catch on for a couple of years. And so, you know, when you ask to talk about bold predictions, like, I mean, I can talk about what I think may happen, but I'm not sure anything really bold is going to happen, because I think we've actually brought some bold things to the market that haven't necessarily been adopted. So if you'll indulge me a minute, I'll just talk about three, maybe not so bold, and then I'll talk about something that might be bold. And so, you know, some of the things I look at is, and I think this is germane for this audience, direct sourcing just sends tremors throughout the staffing world. And the reality is, at least from my experience, it's a big nothing so far. And look, I invested in it, right? But like, everybody's talking about it, but it's far more complex than people realize. And I think there's this fear that, well, staffing is going to go away. And I don't think that's the right approach. And I won't go into great detail. We can answer questions later, because I don't want to take too much time. But the point is, I do think there's a place for direct sourcing, but it's not going to be anywhere near as disruptive as in the US, right? It was already the model in the UK, but as people think it was going to be, I don't think it's going to be that big a deal. Remote ability clearly is the path. And then I think, Rika, ties into the scarcity that you just discussed. And frankly, being able to buy on skills versus positions and not demanding people come to the office. So that's a trend that I think we're going to see increase dramatically. And then diversity is obviously an area that's talked about a lot, but I don't see a lot of action. I've actually seen some action in the last 6 months. And I don't think the inaction has been a lack of desire. I think it's people are confused how to do it. First of all, I don't really know what it means. I don't know legally how I can address it. And then once they get comfortable, who can give me not necessarily diverse staffing firms, but diverse candidates? And some of the partners I'm working with have cracked that code pretty well, and they're lighting it up. So good for them. Good for everybody, I think, on that front. From a bold prediction, I think the world, again, let's talk to analysts and people who want to talk about all the marketing fun stuff. I think the world's a bit cavalier when it comes to AI and how we're talking about that. So my bold prediction is somebody's going to be sued in a massive way for inappropriate use of AI in hiring. And I'm sorry, but I think that'll be a good day for all of us, because at this point in time, I think everyone's running around. You know, you can be a startup with one person or a $50 billion company saying AI, AI, AI. And we've got to do a far superior job talking about transparency, about safety, about approach, and about what they call the ground truth. In other words, how clean is the data that the machine is learning off of? And the reality is, we've been doing AI for years with matching. I mean, it's just, it's algorithms, it's math, it's probabilities, right? But every presentation, you know, people are asking about it, and I'm like, slow down. Let's try to think about what it is we're trying to accomplish, and let's do it in a very responsible, deliberate, thoughtful way. I could sit here all day long and talk about my proprietary algorithm, but there's 30,000 other proprietary algorithms that do the same damn thing. And so when I think about ranking candidates, I think that's really dangerous, and there's a right way and a wrong way. And I don't think people that aren't actually in our space, they're just sheer technologists, don't understand the implications of, in the States, sorry, everybody else, OFCCP and like organizations overseas. And someone's just not going to do their homework, and they're going to sort of buy the shiny object, and they're going to be in court. And that's going to make all of us who are doing it properly look really good. And it's, I think it's something that's necessary, but I see that happening in the near future.
Wow. That's, I think all of us here and everyone who's on, you know, listening to the panel here, the day that there's going to be an announcement on someone being sued in a big time, you know, for exactly what you described, I think we're all going to, you know, remember this moment here. That is, I think that's a very thoughtful and bold prediction.
Well, God help me.
Amazon already had to take away their AI, right? Because they were only proposing men as engineers.
Interesting.
Because based on the historic data, the engineers they hired were mostly men, so they had to take it away.
Yeah, it's fascinating topic. As you just said, Doug, you know, as long as it doesn't affect anyone's company who's represented on the call here or in the audience or anyone we know, yeah, bring it on, right? Yeah. So great. Wow. That's a, you know, a thoughtful but bold prediction, Doug. Thanks. Great. Nice. Over to you, Jenny.
Okay. Well, Doug, one of the things you said really rang true. I was just meeting with our head of product last week, and we were talking about the value of all of the enhancements they're making to Recruiter. And he's like, I can build the best functionality ever, but the fact of the matter is I'm trying to change generations of how people worked. Right. So I can say this is the best thing, but I actually agree with you. The hardest part is going to be, are we going to be able to change people who've been in this industry and on our customer side to make a change? So I strongly agree with your comment there. And on the AI front, I think it's adopting where it's appropriate. Like I'm finding with our recruiting team and our sales team, using that for our customer research is we're becoming much better at that. We're becoming faster at that, leveraging AI. I think candidate outreach using AI makes a lot of sense. I think where we get into the things that Doug is talking about is with regards to searching and when it becomes unfair with regards to selection. So I do think there is ways to infuse healthy, safe ways to infuse AI, but I digress. The prediction I want to make is around your top performers anxiously waiting for their moment to make a move. So as the economy stabilizes, we are going to see another group of people gaining confidence in the willingness to make a move. So our recent stats are that 87% of 1,000 people, every 1,000 people surveyed want to change their job. And that's up 67% year on year. So a big jump. So after a year there's been a ton of layoffs, there's been a lot of uncertainty, we are actually starting to see uptick in January job posts, which is typical. That's seasonality. In January, we typically do, but we're starting to see some stabilization. And so where there's been limited internal movement and a very minimal focus, the companies that have had minimal focus on employee development, there are high performers sitting idle, and achievers don't want to sit idle for long. So we're going to see, I believe, candidates much more willing to make a job change. I don't think that it is going to be as big as it was, a year or two ago or right after COVID. I don't think we're going to see the great resignation, but I do think we're going to see high turnover, or increasing turnover, which will be good for staffing because that will be typically the first places that corporate companies go because they've laid off or changed their TA teams pretty significantly. Along with that, what we're seeing in the data is candidates being far more willing to be bold about their priorities. So things like, and this has come up with both Rika and Doug, about being much more flexible about work environments, hybrid, all of those things where it used to be that the employer used to be able to make all the mandates. I think you're going to see candidates saying no, holding on to jobs a little bit longer, or not willing to take the move or negotiating heavier. So that's the first part. And along with what Rika said about the labor shortages, same thing. But as we see increased turnover and labor shortages, what that means is I think the second bold prediction there is that we're going to begin to see a bigger adoption on skills-based hiring. I think we've been slow to adopt that, and I understand all the reasons why. But the data suggests that skill sets for jobs have changed 25% since 2015. Now, 2015 seems like a long time ago. However, they're projected to shift another 65% by 2030. That's a big jump. So that means if you look at, and I'll post the Jobs on the Rise report that just came out in January from LinkedIn, 2/3 of this year's Jobs on the Rise didn't even exist 20 years ago, and 7 of the top 10 titles didn't exist. So we're going to see a bigger need for hiring managers having to be willing to hire based on skill, based on experience, because you won't have 10 years in a growth revenue job. That's the number one job on the rise. That title didn't exist. So that ability for a recruiter to be able to sell skills and for a candidate to be able to talk about transferable skills is going to be a necessity in the next year.
Great insights, Jenny. I knew you would bring the heavy data points to the discussion, and that's great. The first stat that you mentioned, I don't remember exactly what the number was, something in the 30s of people who are ready to change jobs now.
Yeah, 87.
87, wow.
Yeah.
I think that feeds into Rika's comment, which was basically that, once the market starts to open up again, we're going to see a lot of movement. So, staffing and recruiting companies out there better be ready for that, right?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, great. there's a little button here that says announce Q&A. Let's see what happens when I hit that button. I just did. I hope that it opened the Q&A here to everyone. and we'll see if we have the first questions coming in. I think I saw a few in the chat already, but it's hard to keep track of them once others chime in here, which is great though. So don't stop that. Great. I'll pick up while the first questions come in. I'll pick up on the last comment that you made, Jenny. Skills-based hiring. I will say, and maybe that's just me, but I will say that feels to me like, yes, something like very relevant, but also like, is that maybe the next big buzzword? Haven't we all been hiring skills-based already for a long time? Maybe because some of the jobs that we're hiring for today haven't existed, didn't exist 10 years ago, as you said, Jenny, right? So I'll just throw it out there for what it's worth, but I sometimes feel like, what is that even? And is that the next buzzword? I don't know.
Could be. I will tell you, when we started really going hard on that at LinkedIn, being from staffing, I was like, well, if a corporate customer is wanting to pay a recruiting company, they're going to want the specific skill set, and there's not going to be a lot of flexibility because you're paying a fee. But what we're seeing is, like I said, an increased rate of jobs that didn't exist, or we'll just keep there. So you're going to have to be able to sell on transferable skills, or your talent pool is going to be so small. So I think the buzzword is meant to inspire candidates to do skill development and be focused on continuous learning. That's the first part. And then the second part, just expanding talent pools. I think that's really what the goal of the word is.
That makes sense. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, that makes sense. Great. So of course, happy to continue the conversation here amongst us.
Maybe while you're looking at questions, Daniel, talk about I agree, skills is a buzzword, but it's also real. All the consultancies are talking about it, but it's way harder than it sounds, right? And so, because we've been selling that for 20 years, don't buy a position, buy a skill set. But the reality is people are buying positions. And I think our staffing friends will appreciate this, because we did run some really interesting machine learning exploration, basically. We took a lot of data and we just looked at behavioral clusters for job titles. And so I'm also going to say this. Job descriptions and titles suck. They don't work. And this is why you need staffing folks and MSPs to go in there and say, Daniel, what do you really talk about when you say project manager? Because Jenny's idea of a project manager is different from yours and Rika's. And so I won't name the large customer, but they're really, really big. And we looked at, it wasn't even a project manager, but it was some title that in essence, when we found what they were actually hiring versus the job description, which was in our solution, it, believe it or not, went from all the way from help desk to, it wasn't quite high as a data science, but it was like a level 3 developer, right? Which basically means they're not paying attention to the job description, they're just putting entries, basically what they want to pay. And then they're getting on the phone with a staffing person who actually knows their business, knows the culture, knows the market, and getting the talent they want. So I think there's a lot of work that has to be done. I do actually think AI will be able to help in this area because, for example, one of the things we're able to do in our system is say, look, we know what success looks like from a project manager perspective, how you've hired in the past. Daniel, I think what you're looking for is this. So if I could employ a little behavioral economics and give you a gentle nudge, no gun to the head, but just say, if you'd add these 2 skills and maybe open your horizons, look at this geography, I can reduce time to fill, I can get better requirements to staffing agencies and get should pricing. And so there's some neat work being done, but it's hard. Yeah.
It's so first of all, that sounds like super value add, what you just described, right? Like giving the recruiter the insights to like adjust, fine tune what they're looking for, or the customer ultimately, and increasing the talent pool, that as you said, Jenny. So that's, but yeah, it's certainly harder than it sounds, right? So more to come on that topic. We have a few great questions already, so let's take a look at some of those. Maybe this one here. I guess I get to pick, so I'll take this one here. What are the skills and talent elements that would be in scarcity and in high demand, right? So this is a prediction here that Harry, I think, wants to hear from some of you. Like, what do you think is going to be most in demand once the market comes back? Any thoughts?
Well, if I may, Daniel. So when I always talk to people about what are the skills of the future, I'm not talking about jobs, but I'm talking more about how you should shape your brain in a way. And it's about creative thinking, critical thinking, social skills, and communication skills. And guess what? Those are all skills you don't really learn on social media, because that's one of the other questions. So communication skills, I mean, emojis are fun, but it's not really opening a very thoughtful conversation. So those are for me the skills of the future. But the way we are also addressing it in House of HR, and we won the Impact Award here in Belgium when it comes to social and governance, is that we launched open-minded hiring. So when we address our customers, they get CVs without names if they want to. So we ask them the question. So they don't get names, they don't get age, they don't get number of years of experience. They do get the list of experiences the candidate has, in order to also open the mind of people and at least already surpass the first barrier of just simply looking at CVs and pictures. So in that sense, we're opening also the minds of our customers to be much more open. And we're actually saying, let us be the judge if we believe the candidate could be the right fit for you. And you will get an open-minded hiring CV, and then we will make the selection if that would fit for your company. And that already, we have 70% of our customers that have accepted to actually hire like that, which is quite a success. 30% of the customers still insist on CV, which is fine. I mean, it's a personal choice. But I believe that could be one of the changes indeed, to open up the minds of our customers and be much more open. And we even have testimonials from customers that say, we've hired candidates that we would have never hired before, that have also different skill sets that we would not have hired if we would have just looked at the CV. So I believe when we talked in the beginning around diversity as well, and everyone thinks it's a big trend, but no one really knows how to handle it. I think this could be an important step to changing that and also opening the minds of a lot of people.
And just to clarify for everyone here in the audience, like when Rika says 70% of customers have opted in for this, like she's not talking about like a small pilot, right? She's talking about probably, I know which
it will probably be about 15,000 customers. Yeah.
Think about that. So that's it's not like a little pilot where someone says yes to something that's interesting. This is like real big companies at scale, right? So let that sink in, I would say, right? Great. Rika, would you like to take the second question as well, because you made reference to it already? How do you feel about employee advocacy on social media for selling and recruiting? And then.
Yeah. But I think it's fantastic. But it's always about how do you reward employees that bring colleagues to work. We've had big tests on it, and we actually found, and I think we're not the only ones, that you can promise €1,000 bonus if you bring a friend to work, or you can do cinema tickets or whatever in order to boost that. But what we find is that if employees don't feel appreciated at work, if they don't feel a connection and a true employee engagement to the employer, they will never advocate and they will never publish or job post whatever it needs to be. So I'm a big fan of it. And I think the more employees do it, the better it's actually a signal of employee engagement, that they truly believe that their employer is the best employer in the world, because otherwise they would not dare, or they would never actually expose themselves to publish jobs on social media. So I think it's actually a fantastic sign of employee engagement if you can get your employees to post jobs on their social media or on LinkedIn.
Yeah, they have to feel comfortable with it, right? Like they're putting themselves out there. So yeah, makes sense. Okay, yeah, thank you. Maybe two questions for you, Doug. I'm looking at the clock here. We have 7 minutes left, so I think I can bundle two questions for you, Doug, and then we'll probably have the last one for Jenny. Doug, these two here I think are related, and they both tie back to the topic you mentioned earlier, like AI, and both like use cases of AI in general, but also responsible use of AI, right? And like controlled use, I guess, is what you could call it as well. So the first question, I think, from Praneet ultimately is like, what are the biggest opportunities? Like, where would you deploy AI? Like, what's the biggest opportunity there? And then the second one is from Aaron. the question on whether you see more policy, government compliance, regulation impacting AI in the hiring process. Is there going to be more? It kind of sounded like that's where you were going, Doug, or at least you were maybe calling for it almost. But that's the other one. So more regulation for AI?
Yeah, so let me hit that one first. I'm not that up to speed on it, so I don't want to be disingenuous and pretend I am. My sense, and from what I understand, is that New York is very serious about this, and other states are looking at it. And I'm sorry to be U.S. centric. That's just my experience from this particular topic. I think I always go back to Zuckerberg in front of congressmen with these old white males. I include myself in that. Just don't have a clue about anything, asking him how he makes money, right? So you have this dilemma where the government doesn't even understand what the hell we're talking about. So somebody's going to get on a bandwagon and they're going to make a showcase out of it. But I do think there are some smart, responsible people looking at this, and there have to be some sort of controls, especially around discrimination, which is sort of the obvious one. I love the question, where does it make sense? I think we actually we didn't coin this. I'm sure we stole from somebody, but it's augmented intelligence. It's to help with decision making, not to make decisions. And so I firmly believe that it makes a lot of sense to start looking at kind of the demographic clusters of how you hire and what success looks like, and then help in the sourcing and the vetting, but not ranking, like I said earlier, 1, 2, 3. That human in the loop is necessary for that. And I always use this example. I know people who've gotten married for Match.com, so I think that's awesome. But I guarantee what they didn't do is get on Match.com and all of a sudden say, "Hey, Doug, this is lady Julie," and then he didn't propose, right? I'm probably sensing that we have a lot of interest in common. That's awesome. But I want to go out to dinner and see if you lick your fingers after everything, right? Like there's normal things I want to do, look you in the eye. I look at AI the exact same way. Human in the loop is important. So it can do a really nice job taking the group from here to here so that we're fishing where the fish are and we have a higher propensity for success. I think there's a lot of information around rates and what should be paid for that's directional, that's super helpful. I think buying guidance, not buying decisions, is important. As I said earlier, there's some neat stuff we're doing that just says, hey, look, based on what success as you define it looks like, you're going to have a higher likelihood of success if you go in this direction. But I'm not making a call. Again, I'm just vetting and going from here. And then where I see it being really effective, and this isn't a bold prediction yet because we've got some work to do, but some of the stuff we're looking at with our staffing partners is, how do I help you with winnability? In other words, who would be willing to open up your bullhorn and let me go in with my job description or my skill set requisition and basically automatically pull out 10 candidates while your recruiters are asleep at night? Like, somebody's going to have the courage to do that with me. And I predict at some point, 15 to 20% of fills will happen. Again, we still need human in the loop, but that recruiter will wake up in the morning and be like, whoa, check this out. No, not her, because yes, go. So I think there's a lot that we can do from taking the client data and matching it up with the data in the bullhorns of the world and helping our folks on the winnability factor.
Great. Thanks, Doug. I just saw a new question pop in here into the Q&A. Doug, do you lick your fingers after you're done eating? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Sorry. No.
Only if it's Italian.
Yeah. Okay. In the final 90 seconds, Jenny, how do you recommend consistently measuring level of skills, specifically with decision-making, communication, and social skills? Anonymous question here in the Q&A. So, obviously LinkedIn has all this data on skill sets and what their members put on their profile. Any recommendations there for companies in terms of how you can how you can measure?
Yeah, I think Doug's point is really great about face-to-face time. And I actually think in casual situations, you find out a lot about people's soft skills. And that's what a lot of people are hiring for. It is the most in-demand skills that are coming, is like communication. And I mean, Rika talked about all those things, not necessarily the technical skills, which are definitely in shortage. So clearly when you're hiring at scale for especially non-exempt jobs, it's hard to get that in. You're typically much more in scalable, technology-driven hiring processes. But when you get up the stack in roles, I mean, I think dinners, I think projects, I think presenting, and then throwing in like curveballs in conversations, or like I always ask questions that they could have never been prepared for. So I would highly recommend, like, ask in every interview, what's your most proud accomplishment before you're 18? Joyce Russell asked me that when I started at Adecco, and like you were totally, I was like, wait a minute. So like now I look, does somebody stop and think before they answer? Do they like, so other things than just what comes out of their mouth, but like, how did they answer? What were they thinking? So I think incorporating those types of things in the interview process make a world of difference.
I love how human your answer is, Jenny. You know, you work for the biggest professional network in the world, you know, with the, you know, most data and most members. And here's your very human answer, right? Love that. Love that. Thank you. We're at the end of our session here. I'll summarize the 3 bold predictions here from Rika. Ultimately, get ready for the second half of the year, right? It's going to be hot. Doug says handle with care when it comes to artificial intelligence, and let's make sure that we do the right thing, whether it's technology or human stuff. Let's do the right thing. And number 3 from Jenny, people will start moving again. And so if you want to move, if you're a candidate, and, you know, same thing for your business, make sure that you're clear on, you know, what those skills are that you have or that you can offer to your customers, because skill-based hiring is a real thing. Jenny, Doug, Rika, thanks so much for doing this. Great session. You overperformed, as you always do. Privileged to be on this panel together with you, and thanks everyone for listening in. And I'll see you all soon.
Thanks
so much for having us.